after living that lifestyle, it catches up with you eventually. I was in and out of jail. I remember I turned 13 in a juvenile detention center, 14 in a juvenile detention center, 15 on probation. By the time I was 17 years old, I was in a maximum security prison. A lot of people go to prison because they're young and they're misguided, and they look at the TV for guidance. So they see music videos and all types of movies, and certain type of lifestyles. Street lifestyle is portrayed in the media as being something good and glamorous. And a lot of teenagers aspire to be like these people. And a lot of people, they're poor and they come from bad areas, so they don't have the money to live like these people and these rappers, and they got nice cars and girls and the newest clothes. So this is something that they want. For them, it's acceptance. If you got this, you're cool. So you have to go out and basically, if you're poor, either you got to sell drugs, they start selling drugs, they start robbing people, or things like this at a young age as teenagers. Even when I was young, like maybe 11 or 12 years old, I was holding the guns and the drugs for the people while they would play basketball, and they would give me some money or give me some drugs. And by the age I was 12, I started doing these crimes because it seemed like something normal. And my family was poor, and we lived in housing projects, so we didn't have money. So I got caught up in these, being one of these statistics. I was one of the 2.3 million in the prison. In the prison, they put us in a 21 and under dorm, and this dorm was crazy, like the worst in the state. So I was at the worst prison. Out of 32 prisons in South Carolina, I was in the worst one. And then from that prison, they have 6 dorms, and I was in the worst dorm. And they even had cages around it so you couldn't get thrown off the tier. Because I've seen people get thrown off the tier, and I've seen a lot of things in prison. But it doesn't happen for no reason, like they say on TV. Oh, somebody just got raped or somebody just got stabbed for no reason. If you carry yourself with respect, they respect you. But if you don't carry yourself with respect, then you're gonna have altercations. And most of the things came over card games, basketball, things like this, drugs, because they have a lot of drugs in prison, cell phones and things like this that the guards bring in illegally. People fight over these things. So if you don't get involved if you don't gamble and you don't drink and you don't smoke weed or you don't do drugs, then basically you won't have any problems with people. You can just do your time, respect everybody, they respect you. But I saw a lot of people get killed. I saw people get raped. They borrowed things from people and then they couldn't pay them back, and then they ended up getting raped. That's the way they bait you, they trick you they give you a lot of stuff, and then you can't pay it back, and then they take advantage of you, basically. So before I even went to prison, like I was in the county jail, people told me all the little tricks, that people try to do, so I was already aware. And when you go to prison, you just, you link up with like-minded people that you know from back home. I would link up with all the people from my hometown, and they would show me the ropes, what's going on, who's who, and what's what, and what to do or what not to do. I was 17. I really didn't know what was going on. And luckily, I found the one person in my dorm that was from my city was a Muslim. So I hung out with him, and he taught me how a Muslim lives his life and how the character you're supposed to have. And if you live by this code of character, people will respect you and honor you, for what you're doing. And he taught me basically how to be in prison. Having a felony in America is very hard because a lot of people make mistakes when they were younger and they were teenagers under the age of 18, even as juveniles. But when you go to court, they try you as an adult. I had friends that were 14 years old and got 40 years in prison for their first offense for robbing a store. I got other friends, pretty much my whole class of people I went to an alternative school, I ended up meeting them all in prison, and they had big numbers. I had the less amount of time, and I had 10 years. When you come home, they make it really difficult for you because no one wants to hire you with a felony. They make background checks on you, and if you can't pass, they don't hire you. They don't care. Nobody wants to really give you a chance. And the only type of jobs you can get are basically like working in fast food or some retail store, and they don't want you to climb. You can't really, you start out at minimum wage, and when you do that, you can't really make anything. You can't provide for yourself. You definitely can't pay the rent for an apartment. It's another way it's hard for a person with a felony is that the apartments now, they run background checks as well. So the felony will hinder you from getting a job and also getting an apartment. So now you're out here, you made a mistake when you're young. What do? You know, you can't get a job. And then even if you get a small job, you can't get an apartment because one, you can't afford it, and two, they run the background check. You could check out books, they could bring it to your cell. So I had seen someone in the county jail before I went, and they were praying, and I didn't know what they were doing. And I asked somebody, and they said, oh, he's making salat. But I didn't know what he was doing. So they said he had a Quran, and I was like, I want to read the Quran, but he was in a different block than me, like a cell block than me, so I couldn't get it. So I said, okay, one day I'm going to get that book, and I'm going to read it and see what it says. So when I got to the processing center, I asked for one. This guy, he said, well, I'm really not supposed to bring you this because they didn't like non-Muslims reading the Quran for some reason. It was about purification. You were supposed to be pure. Only the Muslims were really supposed to have it. But he said, I'll let you hold it for an hour or two, and I'll come back and get it. And so I sat for that hour. I looked in the index, and I looked up all the verses about Jesus, peace be upon him. And I read about Mary, and I read about Christianity from the index, what the Quran said about it. I really liked it. So then they shipped me to another processing center because that one got full. I was there for like 2 weeks. So it happened there was a Muslim in my room. He became my roommate for that short 2 weeks. So one day I'm sitting on the bunk, and he just gets up in the middle of the floor and starts calling adhan. But I didn't know what he was doing, so I was like, what is this guy doing? You know, he's just in the middle of the floor, and he's yelling in some other language I never heard before. And it's an African-American guy, and I was just like, I never met any African-Americans that did this, and I grew up with, you know, African-Americans my whole life. So it intrigued me, and I was like, what is this guy doing? So he went and prayed, and then he prayed. I said, oh, I saw that before in the county jail. I'm going to ask this guy. So I had already read the Bible from cover to cover previously because I was in the county and I had a lot of time, you know, 23 hours lockdown. I wanted to read the Bible to see what my family was telling me because they're Christian. So this guy, when he finished praying, I bombarded him with all these questions, all the questions I had, and he answered all of them. And I said, wow, this is it. I want to be a Muslim. He was like, okay, but you got to learn how to pray. So I'm going to teach you how to pray. He taught me Fatiha, and by that time, I got shipped off to my prison that I was supposed to go to. So back to the guy that I met, my friend, the one guy that was from my hometown. He was teaching me how to be a Muslim. And I told him, oh, I know Fatiha already. And he said, okay, good. So he taught me the rest of the prayer. And then I took my Shahada, and basically I just joined the ranks right then and started praying with the community. A lot of people see me with tattoos and they wonder, oh, why is this Muslim guy got tattoos? When I was growing up, I grew up in prison basically from age 16 till I was 25. and that's the life I came from, even though I was a Muslim. But my culture and the way I grew up is we had tattoos, but they weren't just random tattoos that just don't mean anything, and designs and pictures and stuff. I always got tattoos that made sense to me and something relevant to my life. On my arm, I have one that says "Still Standing." That just reminds me, I went through a whole lot in life, but I'm still here. I'm still making it. And no matter how low you get, even when I was locked in a room all by myself for months, on 6 months at a time, I didn't even see people, or I was all by myself, solitary confinement. I went through all that stuff, but I still made it. So it just reminds me of things where I came from. And so I never forget where I came from. A lot of times when you get frustrated and you feel down, you look down and you kind of put your head down when you're sitting down. And the first thing I'll see when I look down like that is I'll see it says "Fear Allah." So to remind me and bring me back to the remembrance of Allah. So once I started praying with the Muslims and started interacting with the people in my dorm, a lot of people started trying to pull me different ways. I started hearing terms like Sunni and Shia and Sufi and these things, and I was like, I don't know what any of that is. I'm a Muslim, and that's all I know. One God, and Muhammad's the messenger. So these people were like, oh, just say you're Sunni. Just say you're Sunni if anybody asks. And I was like, well, what is a Sunni? And they were like, just say you're Sunni and that's it. Just that's good. If anybody asks you, just say you're Sunni. And I said, well, I want to know what a Sunni is before I claim something, because I came from a gang environment and a gang mentality. And if you false claim on a gang set, that's something that could get you killed, because you don't say you're anything unless you really know what it's about and you can back it up. So I said, I want to know what this Sunni thing is before I say I'm a Sunni. And I want to know what this Shia thing is before I say I'm a Shia. So I talked to the brother that taught me and gave me my Shahada. He was Shia. And the whole community was basically Shia. And there was let's say there was 80% Shia, 20% Sunni in this one location where I was at. And for those of you who don't know, there's a big population of Muslims in prison. There's maybe 200 to 300 Muslims at each facility, probably. And let's say we had 30 facilities. There's a lot of Muslims everywhere, Sunni and Shia, and they all share the same space, but they might have different ideologies and different beliefs. But I looked at the prison where I was at, and the leader of it was Shia, and he was the most knowledgeable. He learned Arabic, he knew the Quran really well, he had learned Hadith, and everything he said, basically, he could back it up and prove it, and it made sense. I asked him about what it is, and he said they follow the Prophet's family because they were the closest ones in relation to the Prophet after his martyrdom. So he gave me some books to read. I said, okay, I want to be Shia. After he explained everything to me, I said, this makes sense. I'm going to be Shia, and I don't really care about what the other people say, because I have to go with what makes sense to me. So he gave me books like Then I Was Guided and a few other books. So I read these books. And he told me, don't ever say that, don't take your religion from me or from anybody else. You have to take it from the books. Because then when somebody says, where did you learn this from? You can't say, brother so-and-so told me this. That doesn't really hold any weight. But if you learn it from the books, you can say, I learned it from this book, from this scholar, on this page, and this author, and you can show and prove your beliefs. This one over here. Another Quran. Got a box, so we can stack these things here.
Is there any more room in this one?
No, but we want to put 6 books in each one, so we
Okay,
don't want to look like we overload them.
Okay, cool. So, all right, we got that.
I'm going to put this in here, too.
Yeah, make sure you put the letter in there.
Before I went home, I did about 9 years then. I came in August 2000. I came in August of 1998. I came home August 2007. So I did 9 years straight. So right before I went home, they sent me to like a pre-release like 2 months before, try to get me ready. But I don't think anything can get you ready to come home after a long time like that. It's almost a decade. So I didn't know what to expect. I came in as like a teenager. I'm going out as, a young man in his mid-20s. I don't know what to expect. The world's changed. A lot of stuff's changed. Something is strange, trying to adjust over all that time. Things were different. I went to the mall, for instance, with my dad, and I go in the restroom, and I come out to wash my hands, and I'm looking for the handles on the sink, I don't know where they're at. So I'm staring at the sink. I don't know if you can imagine it. I'm looking at the sink. I'm trying to figure out where the handles are. And all of a sudden this guy walks up beside me, and he puts his hands under the sink, and the water's coming out. And I'm like, wow, how do you do that? They didn't have that before I went to jail. Before I went to jail, gas was 87 cents. I come home, gas was like $5. So I was like, wow, a lot's changed, Had to get people to show me what to do, how do I go about getting a job application? You got to get online. I didn't even, they just came out with the internet not too long before I went to prison. So everything was different. I didn't know how to use a cell phone. I didn't know what an MP3 player was. All these things, it's just seemed like a whole lot of learning that I had to do. Nobody can explain that feeling. I can't even explain it, coming home for the first time. It's just something you can't explain. Problem comes when these people get out of prison for doing all this time, and they're supposed to have paid for their crime that they did, and made their amends, paid for their crime, and everything's supposed to be behind them now. They face a new challenge when they come home, is they have to find a job, get an apartment, and when you go through those struggles that I mentioned earlier, then a lot of people, if you don't have strong faith, or you don't have any family support, or you just come home from prison and don't have anybody there, and you're just trying to make it on your own with nothing, because they just basically drop you off at a bus stop or put you out the door, and you don't have anything anymore. Before, you were getting free meals, 3 hots and a cot, that's what they call it. So you got no rent, free meals, and now you come out here, you have to provide for yourself. Can't get the job, can't get the apartment, you get frustrated, and a lot of people, they go back to doing the same thing that they used to do, and it's a big revolving door, and they get out, they can't make it because no one will give them a chance, and then they end up coming back in.
Being an African American and Shia Islam can actually be a test at times, because, sometimes coming from other cultures, the cultures may clash, people do things a different way. Is America racist, and why? Some individuals in America are racist. Maybe a percentage, maybe a high percentage of people in power may be racist in America. The reason why people are racist in America that are in high positions is because many people, as I've heard in one lecture, many people are racing towards greed and power. So this power comes in the form of economics. When you have a certain class of people who want economical strength, they may exercise race to make sure that their families are taken care of in the next 100 years. In that way, they may say, oh, well, we're going to only marry into this race. We're not going to marry anyone else. We're going to only provide jobs for this race and this class. We're not going to provide jobs for anyone else. And we're going to look out only for our own. And this is absolutely opposite of what Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wa alihi did. I was born in Washington, D.C., in a neighborhood that is, it's a side of town called Southeast Washington. It was a bad area at the time, I seen a lot as a little kid. There was a war between New York and D.C., the gangsters in the neighborhood. So my friends, they were from, Lincoln Heights, so after school, when I didn't have anywhere to go, I would go to their home, right? So, it was a natural occurrence for us to just be walking, and we would just see people riding down the street. I'll never forget, sometimes we would see people riding down the street in this truck. It was called a trooper, right? I think it was Mitsubishi or something like that, or Isuzu, I'm not sure. And we seen a guy, he was like hanging out the sunroof with 2 Uzis and just shooting at people. You know, the people that were like in front of us, not walking in front of us, but the people who were like on a basketball court. And we were running, and we were running. We was running for our lives, right? My mom, she lived in the neighborhood that was adjacent to Lincoln Heights. So it was kind of like a turf kind of thing with them and us, because our neighborhood was residential with, you know, single family homes. But then we stayed in a little apartment that was on a place called Foot Street Northeast. And, you know, it was 6 of us. It was almost 6 of us in there together. And it was rough. You know, my dad, he was going through rough times. He was trying to keep his house that he was at. And my mom didn't have much money and stuff like that. So it was very rough. It was very rough. I mean, you know, we're trying to do work and do our homework and stuff like that. But then we're thinking about, are we going to eat that night? At that point, I started to hook up with people in the neighborhood because we were hungry, you know. I was trying to hook up with people in the neighborhood. And, you know, I'm Muslim, so I can only eat fish sticks, you know, and fish. So, and tuna fish, right? So I'm trying to call around to my friends and ask them, where you going to eat lunch, you know, and what you have for dinner? And, you know, and it was rough for my mom. She was working in a daycare center, and she was barely paying the bills herself. So, you know, I actually hooked up with the wrong crowd at that time, and I got out into the world and started doing some things that I shouldn't have. And, you know, the thing is, like, I started to meet the people, and I started to know their pain, and they would tell me stories about their families and how hard it was for them. So for me, I was just thinking, like, you know, I was young, we were okay, you know, my dad was doing okay, so, you know, I'm just thinking, oh, he's going to come back one day and everything's going to be all right. But it was just rough. So I had got out into the studio life and into that world. And once that happened, you know, I would just come out front. It was just a regular occurrence that people would sell drugs in front of your building, you know. So, you know, I was seeing it. And seeing these things like that, you know, it just really made me aware of the danger that's in the neighborhood, you know. People could ride up at any point and just shoot you. People are trying to, and naturally, if someone is selling drugs in front of your building, then that means that the robbers are around. And if they come to rob you, and they only see you outside, and you might be just walking to a payphone, or you might be walking to the corner store, and it's at night, you know, they're not gonna know the difference between you and the guys who are doing whatever they're doing. So, you know, a couple of times I got robbed, you know, at gunpoint, laying on the ground, and, you know, I didn't know a lot of du'as at the time, so I'm on the ground, and, you know, I'm saying Fatiha on the ground because I'm thinking it's my last moment, you know, and the guys are discussing how they're gonna kill me or not.
The place is banging.
Yeah, that's what they got.
Yeah, right there.
Halal
police
pieces.
station right here. And then the liquor store.
They got the liquor store on every corner. We wanted to turn this place over here into a center for Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, but they was charging a whole bunch of money. It's another place that's right here that I called the guy, and it's not that big, but we wanted to turn that into, remember we was going to do the library.
Yeah.
Yep. Instead, we had to go online because we couldn't get funding. When I was out there and living in the neighborhoods, I hooked up with some of the guys in Southeast Washington. And, you know, this was later on in my life. And, you know, from my side of town, most of the time, you know, the guys from Southeast don't really hook up. But I had a lot of cousins from Southeast. And, you know, I used to meet there, you know, my cousins' friends and their homies. And, you know, they just really enjoyed me, really liked me because I was genuine with them. And all I had at the time, you know, I was like, you know, just Nahjul Balagha and how Imam Ali was really fair to the people. So I just was being fair to them. And, you know, they loved me because they knew they could be around me, whatever kind of money they had, or whatever it was. I wasn't trying to kill them or rob them or kill them or anything like that. So the people who run the campaign, who is Hussein, they had a banner that was on the back of a bus. So my cousin called me one day out of the blue, and he said, "Man, you know that guy you taught me about, Imam Hussein?" He was like, "Man, I seen the what do you call it? Billboard on the back of a bus." He was like, "Man, is that who that is?" And I was like, "Yes, that's him." And he showed me the picture, and it was of Imam Hussein, whoishussein.org. And it just really like, so for him, when he sees that on top, on the back of buses, he'll tell his other friends, "This is the Islam that my cousin taught me about. The Islam that he says that will set your life free, give you freedom." When we were young, we were going to the Shia school out in Potomac, Maryland. But this over here was the stop for the people who went to the school that was from the downtown area. This was their stop over here. This is where the parents met up. You can go straight. This is where the parents met up. So to get the kids and take them to different parts of the city. So we would see when the bus would stop. My father, he drove the van, and it was times when my father was driving, and they would be having a shootout in the middle, and we would like be weaving through traffic. He would try to make sure that the kids were safe. On different occasions this happened. So, we were seeing this as kids, even when we were in Muslim school, because we lived downtown. I started to look for an outlet for my pain and my anger and stuff like that as a child. So I started to write poetry, but it was in the form of, in those days, it was in the form of hip hop, right? So I would write these raps and stuff like that, and people would like them, and I would say them to my friends, and from there, I started to kind of journey out into becoming a hip-hop artist. I had these dreams in my mind and stuff like that. So that took me down some bad places in life, but I learned the people, and I learned their pain through that place. And I learned that a lot of them are actually looking for God, and they're looking for a way out. This is my mom's neighborhood right here, and this is called Miracle Court. They got different courts: faith, wisdom, miracle, I believe. This is Miracle Court, and this is one of the places where I pray for a miracle to happen many times, so that I can get my mom and my nephews out of the neighborhood for good, So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put me around some good people and gave me the story of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. And this is where people may not think so, but this is a place where we call on Imam Mahdi ajalallahu ta'ala farajahu sharif to come help these people and to help us get out of this place and come back and help them get out of this place. And maybe one day they'll come back and buy this place and do it all over. Assalamu alaikum. What's up? What's going on? How you feeling? Good. Well, who upstairs? Everybody in the front room? All right. You ain't got to put your hood on. You good. You ready? Assalamu alaikum. All right. This is my nephew right here, Twan right here, young rapper. Hopefully we get him on the right path. This is my nephew Malik, and that is the shrine of Abu Fadl Abbas and Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Yes, that's the pride and joy of this place here. This is where, I come and I teach them about the Ahlul Bayt, and whenever they get into trouble and they get into it with each other, I try to come and teach them about the togetherness. Like sometimes they might quarrel with each other, right? So I teach them about the togetherness of the brotherhood of Abu Fadl Abbas and Imam Hussein alayhi salam, and how they stuck together in the fight in Karbala against Yazid la'natullah alayhi. This is it, you know. The lavish mansion, you know, mashallah. One of the things that I seen in the neighborhood that disturbed me was that, you know, a lot of people in the neighborhood, they want out. They want to find a way out. Me, myself, now, I know that if they embrace the message of Imam Hussein alayhi salam and Ahl al-Bayt alayhi salam, that would really help them get a clear mind state, and it would help them make better decisions towards career choices and things like that. Now, one of the things that I seen was that, you know, coming out of high school, majority of the youth, which is going on right now, majority of the youth, they are trying to get jobs. In America, you know, a start out paying job might pay you maybe $8 an hour nowadays. I think that's minimum wage. And, you know, $8 an hour in a neighborhood where now in Washington, D.C., a lot of neighborhoods, rent is maybe about $1,200 a month, $1,000 at the minimum, about $1,000 a month, right? So having an $8 an hour job at the end of the 2 weeks or the end of the week, the money that you have to survive on for transportation and the money that you have to survive on for food, money becomes very low quickly. The sabr, the patience is not there. So they go and they turn to the streets where they feel like, okay, this person will give me a chance with, you know, this illegal substance, and they go do things that are bad. And from that point, they get incarcerated because, you know, it's no secret that whoever does things like this for long enough, they're going to go to jail. Once they go to jail, it's a process and it's a vicious cycle and system that starts. Majority of the time for drug charges in the neighborhood, they receive what is called a felony. Once they get a felony, all of their rights are taken from them, majority in the society. You cannot vote with a felony. When you get out of jail, there are many, many, many institutions that you cannot work for with a felony. And it's not law, but it's company policy that they do. So they're designed with it. So the people come back from jail after doing their time period in jail, and then they get released back into society, and the sabr is still not there. So they're running around and trying to get this $8 an hour job again. Once they get this $8 an hour job again, they start to say that, you know, money is still not coming in, it's hard for me to survive. And then at this point, maybe some of them may have a child involved, and they may have, you know, family involved and stuff like that. So the sabr leaves them, the patience leaves them, and they go back into a life of crime. One of the stories that stand out to me is someone that was close to me, and he went to jail for a crime, and, you know, I tried to talk to him about Islam and give him as much good nasiha that I could, you know, great advice Islamically. But he went to jail and he came home. And once he came home, the probation that he was placed on, supervision, they told him that he had to get a job by 3 months. This is a young man. He's probably maybe no more than 20 years old. If you don't get the job by 3 months, then you have to go and have this thing called the electronic box on your leg, right? And that monitors wherever you go, you're limited, you have a curfew. And then from there, if you don't get a job within maybe 2 months later, after that, 5 months altogether, you have to go back to jail just because you didn't get a job, right? This was part of his probation process. And, you know, the social worker that was working with him, from my understanding, was not, you know, trying to give him any opportunities to get jobs and stuff like that. See what we got? I went online one day and I talked to Brother Mateen, and I seen that he was visiting a lot of masjids at the time, and it looked real fun, right? And I was like, this guy's on tour. He's going everywhere. So he was one of my Facebook friends. So I hit him up, and I was like, bro, we get together. And I seen that he had these tattoos. And one of the tattoos had something about Ahlul Bayt on it, right? And I was like, oh, okay, he's here. He's here. We started to get on the phone with each other more and more and more. And the next thing you know, he started to tell me, his experience in jail. So, I didn't really spend that much time in jail in my life, I only did maybe about 4 months, three or 4 months or something like that in jail. So his experience was like years, right? So for me, it was like in and out. I wouldn't advise it for anyone. It's a deep experience for anyone to go in for a day, 2 days, whatever. But his was like his way of life at one point. So he would tell me stories about the jail, but he used to tell me about the unity as well in jail. And I was really interested in that. He was telling me how everyone had to really pull together because all they had was Islam. And he would tell me how the Shias were in jail. So I was like, wow. So then from that point, he had started to tell me that, he was sending brothers like money and sending brothers books and stuff like that to jail. So I was like, wow, you still send people stuff from jail? He was like, yeah. So he said, I really wanted, man, to start sending books to the prisons, and he came up with the idea. So when he approached me about it, I was like, yeah, I know some people that's locked up too. Some of them share and everything. And he was like, I said, we could make this a lot bigger.
When I came home from prison, I still kept in touch with a lot of friends that I had that had life sentences. And one of the brothers, he's an older guy. He taught me a lot about, how to be a man in general. Like when I was younger, I was a teenager. And he told me sometimes I would, I was still young and running wild a little bit in my first years, and he'd pull me to the side and, hey, Mateen, you can't do that. You're Muslim now. You got to keep it together. Don't argue with the police or whatever. I used to argue a lot with the police officers, and I just be real argumentative. And he's like, man, you got to do your time easy, and just try to, do the best you can, and just stay away from those people and don't argue with them about stuff. So I always keep in touch with him, and he told me, Mateen, I got a life sentence. I'm never going to go home. Maybe I might go home. Maybe I'm going to die in here. I don't know. I'm old. I can't never go to a masjid. I learned about this religion. I love it. I just pray one day I can go make sajda in a masjid, and on the outside. And he said, maybe you can go do this and then write me and tell me about your feelings and send me pictures, and I could live it through you, stay in touch with me. And I think about our centers, how many people go to the centers and pray Salatul Fajr or any of these other, Salatul Jummah and these things. We have a center, maybe it's close to us down the street, and maybe we don't even go. We got a program, it's like, I'm going to stay home and watch TV, I'm not going to go to the program. And you got these other people, never had the chance to go to a center, never went to a program, never prayed in a masjid, and their just one wish is that they could do that, and we have it, and we take it for granted, So I knew the problems that these brothers were facing. They were debating these Salafi, Wahhabi, Sunni, they call themselves Sunnis. They were debating these people all the time about certain issues. I was in there, so I know the issues, Infallibility, they argue about infallibility of the imams and the prophet, about Abu Talib, was he a believer or not a believer, the way we pray, all these different things, the sufferings that happen, the atrocities that happen to Ahlul Bayt, and they argue if they did happen or they didn't happen. And if you can prove your beliefs, those Sunnis, if they're a majority, their rule is basically, if you can prove it from a book and you can show us that it says this, we'll leave you alone and you can practice it. But if you're just in here doing stuff, and you can't prove it, then we're not going to let you do it. And if you do it, we're going to make you leave the community by force. So the main thing is proof. You have to prove it. So while I was in jail, I basically tried to educate the new Shias about why we do certain things the way we do. And I actually wrote the book and I put it together when I came home. It's called Mystery of the Shia. because I was always on a daily basis having to teach these people the same thing, you know, why we don't fold our arms in salat, or why we say Hayya ala khara amel and adhan, or these things like this, why we don't say Ameen after Fatiha. I found myself repeating it over and over again. So I decided to write it down and make it easier. So the next person can come, I could just say, hey, take these notes, read them, bring them back to me, and we'll talk about it. So when I came home, I put it all together into a book called Mystery of the Shia. But I made these books and the other ones like Suffering of the Ahlul Bayt to make these accessible. These are the issues they're dealing with. So I send these books into the prisons. Like that book, maybe I had to take 30 different books to make all the sources for the one book. And in prison, you can only have 10 books at a time on your person in your cell, or they'll come in and they'll take the other ones and they'll throw them away. So it's hard to prove your beliefs if you can only have 10 books. So I tried to make these things condensed in one book where they could just carry one book and, you know, pretty much prove the majority of their beliefs. So that leaves up space so they can learn from other books. So I started sending these books into the prisons to my friends that I had left behind in South Carolina, you know. And then I met up with some other brothers here in D.C. area. Other brother used to give me money and was like, hey, man, you need money to send books? I want to give you some money, you know. Another brother came and said, hey, I know people in prison too, you know, and maybe we can expand this thing. My friend Ibrahim was like, maybe we can expand this thing. And we could send more than just your friends in South Carolina. Maybe we can send it to other prisoners in other states, but we got to come up with something to reach out, you know, and do it. And that's when we started sitting down, brainstorming, how can we do this, you know, and come up with this thing. And basically, that's how we founded Yasin Publications, and we founded a Second Chance book program out of this to send books to prisoners.
He was telling me that, you know, we need to get the books into the prison because right now they can block the books from different ways, right? Different chaplains and stuff like that bring books into the prisons, and sometimes when there are people who are against the Shias and the Ahlul Bayt alayhimu salam, they will stop the books from coming in. So he devised a very great way through the online way of shipping the books into the prisons where it would come to the actual prisoner as mail and not as like something that had to be given to them by a chaplain or be given to them in their musalla, in their places of study, in the jails. So I was like, well, that's genius, you know, that's great. We started to let people know that they could write our organization and they could get books. And the letters started to pour in. We would send them free books. People donate, let's say like $25 would get each prisoner maybe 6 books. So I thought that was amazing, you know, because we would print the books at cost, right? And just, you know, send them into the prison for free for the prisoners because they don't have any money, you know. They're going through poverty. Their families are back home going through poverty. So the next thing you know, the letters are starting to come back. And they're telling us that the people are in the prisons converting to Shia Islam.
Originally met Brother Mateen through Facebook, and we began talking, and you know how it is when two guys meet. Oh, who do you follow? You know, what school of thought are you from? What made you, you know, convert? And all of these sorts of topics were raised between us. Immediately I knew, you know, he was a doer, not a talker. So I ran some ideas by him and he ran some ideas by me. And one of his ideas was this second chance program that, you know, because he's served time himself, he's very familiar with the environment, with what's on offer at, you know, the certain prisons, shall we say, in which states and how the laws are. We thought, you know what, because these books are sort of cheap already to manufacture and sell and everything, why don't we sort of put like a little package together of 6 books, which we charge $25 for, which is the cost price of what it costs to print them. And in these 6 books, let's have 1 book on sort of Islamic laws, so everyday fiqh, everyday, how can I do my wudu this way, can I do it that way? 1 book on usul ad-din, the 5 core principles of Islam. We'll have 1 book on the Ahlul Bayt as a whole, just like general background, general knowledge. And the other 3 books will leave depending on what sort of letters we receive from the inmates. And then those 3 books, since starting this publishing company, we've sent over 650 books to over 100 different inmates in 12 different states in America. And out of those 100 inmates who've written to us requesting books, 10 to 15 of them that we know of from their letters to us have converted to Shia Islam from, being, I think we've had 2 or 3 Salafis and Wahhabis who've actually written and said, you know what, I've realized the error of my ways, I've found that Imam Ali is truly beautiful and the Ahlul Bayt is the way forward in life. There's nothing but them, basically.
These are the letters we got from today. We checked the mailbox, there's about 20 letters here, but I haven't talked with you guys in a while, so I want to tell you about some of the other letters that we got. People have been writing us saying, they're writing us 1 letter, and saying, I'm Sunni, I want to learn about Shia Islam. We had people say they follow Maliki school, Shafi school, and this Hanbali, these things. And with several of them, they wrote us 1 month, said, send us some books. I want to learn about Ahlul Bayt. What is this? I'm a Sunni, I want to learn about Ahlul Bayt and see what it's about. I sent them the books that we had, and they wrote us back the next month and said, I now am on the ark of salvation, and I follow the Ahlul Bayt, and I believe in the Imams, and it was amazing, Other people been writing us saying we're the only hope for them to get Shia material, because some of the Salafi chaplains were removing them from the libraries. So with our books, they get them in their person. They don't get them in the library. So they get personal mail, and they can keep the books in their cell and share it with who they want to share it with. So they said we're kind of like their only hope to get Shia Islam, and they're really grateful for what we're doing and things like that. And a lot of other people been writing us too, talking about they never heard about the tragedy, Imam Hussein alayhi salam in Karbala, and they're just totally moved by it. They say it brought them to tears. I was reading this letter here that we got today from, looks like a Spanish brother from California. He said, just a small part of it, I sent him the book that I compiled, The Suffering of the Ahlul Bayt, a month ago. He said, now, these are prisoners, what I'm saying? Some of these dudes are killers on death row, like straight hard, they fight, they're tough, they don't cry and all this type of stuff like that. He wrote us and said, now I'm not a man prone to tears, but many times during my reading of the events of Karbala and the injustices and dishonorable mistreatment of Imam Hussein alayhi salam and the family of our holy prophet had me on the verge of tears and beyond. It saddens me that so many people can stray from the path of the truth. I've been trying to change my behavior and conduct myself in appropriate fashion, and I'm wondering if you have a book on the traditions of the Holy Prophet of Islam. So this guy, he never heard about Karbala, and it made him tear up, like a hardened criminal, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
The reason why I felt there's a need for to not just spread the knowledge of Ahlul Bayt, but also inform, especially in the prison environment. It's mostly funded by the Salafi Wahhabi movement. And most of the books which are sent to prison are basically published by the Saudi publishing companies. It's been such books are mostly anti-Shia books, written specifically about anti-Shiism and against Iran, and basically they have created this idea that the Shias are from one sect which was condemned by the Prophet, They absolutely, the ideas which are published, are written in these books. I was astonished that knowing that these are the Shias, and it has absolutely nothing to do with the Shiaism. And once a newly converted Muslim, when he would read such books, he would absolutely think that the Shias are basically a follower of Judaism, and they have just taken this garb of Islam to destroy Islam from inside. But this is absolutely far away from the truth. I would envision to have to have a learning center, or to have at least Shia books in every learning center, in every prison, whether even non-Muslims read it, or Muslim from our brothers in Ahl Sunnah reads it, they at least know the truth about Shia Islam. It doesn't necessarily have to be making them converted to Shia, but having the knowledge of the Ahl Bayt. That's what their goal was, not to have everyone follow them, but just have everyone recognize that they are the best, Allah's best creation.
This brother here, he's from South Carolina, and he wrote us and he said, Assalamu alaikum. I am incarcerated indigent Muslim, and I would like to obtain any free dawah literature that I may share and propagate the deen to the general population at large. I thank you in advance and pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rewards you for any of your aid and assistance offered to me. And, he says shukran and jazakallahu khair. And, this is someone who may have obtained our information through the other prisoners to show that, there are people, the word is spreading around, and there are more people. And this is actually the goal that I was looking for when we first started. In order for this to spread, they have to talk about it to other prisoners. And like you were saying and mentioning that, it's in their cells. So it's not like material that they can come take from them. Just like they have their personal letters from their family. People are not going to just come in your cell and take your books.
Yeah,
you know what
exactly.
I mean? Because that's a violation in jail.
Yeah.
So, but if it's stuff that's on like in the library, in the religious part of the library, they can block this book, that book, and only let mainstream Wahhabi or Salafi material get out to the general population.
I noticed in that letter he said that he wanted dawah material so he could learn it and teach the other prisoners.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
This one guy, he said here that this will be the last one I read, but he said basically, I'm interested in converting to Islam and learning about the traditions of the Prophet Muhammad. I was told by another brother that you'll send me 6 starter books. If so, can you please send me a Quran for the Muslim library? The Muslim library is out and I have no access to the library. So like these guys, they don't even have access to books. He's asking us, he's like pleading with us to send them books, and I feel like if we don't send it to them, then, like you said, Allah asked us, somebody came to you, they don't have access to Quran, they want to learn the words of Allah, and it's nothing to send, a few dollars out of your check to send them a book. And then if we don't send them Quran, this guy want to learn, and he might be misguided and say, well, they never sent me. He can go to Allah and say, hey, Allah, I asked these people for Quran, and they didn't give it to me, and I had no way to get it. Inmates and people who come home from prison as all these people are a waste of time. They can't change. Why should I even put any effort in to try to help them? But one story that stood out to me a lot when I converted to Islam was Abu Dhar al-Ghafari, companion of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When he converted, he went back to his tribe and he converted his whole family after he learned about Islam. What he used to do before Islam, he used to be a highway robber. So anybody who passed through their town, basically he would rob them and steal from them. And he was like a gangster, and he lived that lifestyle. And I related to him because I came from that same background. And then when he converted to Islam, he totally changed, and he even changed his whole community because they saw how much he changed from following the example of the Prophet.
Another story that really stuck with me was the story of Imam Musa al-Qadim alayhi salam and what he went through in the prisons. And at that point, I really started to be very interested in the prisoners. What he went through, the chains and how they treated him and how they used to pick him up and bring him out of a hole so that he could make prayer and then push him down the hole, kick him in the face. And the things that he went through, it was really like an eye-opener for me that we think we have it hard, but the Ahlul Bayt, and this was the bloodline of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And for people to treat him that way and treat them that way, it was just like, wow, you know, how can someone treat them this way? And this is the messenger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who gave us the Quran, who told us that you do not owe me anything except for love for my nearest kin.
One way Ahlul Bayt helped me during my prison time was learning about their stories, because I had modeled the people I knew in my neighborhood and like the toughest guys around or the gang leaders, and I was living like the bad life, street life, all this corruption, and that got me nowhere, you know, it got me in prison. So when I was reading about and those people had no morals and no care, you know, they didn't care. They was just like survival of the fittest. Like if you gotta mess somebody over or cross somebody out to get ahead, then they do it, you know. When I learned about Ahlul Bayt, their lives, it's just the morality of them and what they did and how they acted and how they behaved, even with their enemies, you know. I figured if you could just try to take even a few of those stories or just take a few characteristics from their life, and if you can implement them in your life, it would just make the world a better place, you know. You could affect people in a positive way, and then people will see you acting differently. They'll say, oh, why do you act like that? You're different than everybody else. Why don't you go out and party and drink, and you don't want to go to the club with me, and you don't want to drink, and you don't want to do this or that and do drugs? Oh, why, man? You know, it seems strange to people. But then you start telling them stories about Ahlul Bayt and about their life and their sacrifice. You know, Imam Hussein, alayhi salam, he gave everything for Islam. And my thing was, how could I, you know, after knowing what he sacrificed for Islam, how can I go out and do what Yazid did?
Ahlul Bayt TV, the holy household for every household.